Primeval is the action-packed finale of the season, in a sense. It's not actually the final episode, as that's when things get really weird, but it's time for the conclusion of all the major storylines. First, we have to finish off the cliffhanger from the end of the last episode, with Riley being recalled into Adam's clutches, seemingly an obedient soldier. It's immediately revealed that his body is being controlled, but his mind is not. As discussed previously, this late-game plot twist doesn't really work, thematically or on a structural level. Riley has had a few different conflicts this season. The first was hiding secrets from Buffy, the second was recognizing that the world wasn't black and white, and the third was an extension of that, discovering that not every supernatural beast is inherently evil. The idea behind the chip is that he is being literally controlled by a government who had shaped him, that he is unable to resist his programming, with the obvious comparisons to Adam. It just never quite gets there in any respect, unfortunately. We've already seen him resist the initiative, just a few episodes ago when he stood up to protect Oz, and then walking away from Maggie after she tried to kill Buffy. In both cases, it was development for his character, moving past being the mindless automaton he was trained to be. Regressing for half an episode due to a supernatural element doesn't work with the ideas that have been presented, and just feels like retreading the same ground. They also mentioned that the chip was placed near his heart rather than his brain, so that he can remove it himself, but Spike and presumably other vampires have the chip in their head. The whole idea just doesn't come together. Spike and Adam have a spirited discussion where Spike realizes that his plan to split up the Scoobies, then get them to share information, doesn't work. It feels like two comedic minions of the big bad hashing out a harebrained scheme instead of what it should be, a moment of dramatic tension where Adam's final plan is revealed. It really encapsulates the problems with Season 4, with the juxtaposition of comedy and drama not really gelling and coming into conflict with one another. There are multiple scenes this episode featuring Spike having this same tension, and none of them quite work. The Scoobies then have a post-argument hangover, although it's literal in Giles' case. The scene to highlight is Xander's, however, as he lies in bed, succumbing to the depressive thoughts that he's had all season. The idea that he hasn't grown up from being a high school loser, and all his attempts to get a job or change would be ultimately fruitless. Here, however, Anya is able to pull him out of it, expressing the real connection and love they share. That's the biggest change in his life from the start to the end of the season. He has a real romantic relationship. There's no time for slow character moments, however, as we head to the super-duper secret initiative lab with Zombie Walsh. The effects here are fine if a little cheesy. Zombie Forest is where it goes too far, with almost every single line he utters being over the top. This is another element that, in theory, could have worked. He was Riley's best friend, and after Riley abandoned the initiative he died, thus there is an element of guilt and betrayal. There's also Forrest's unrequited love for Riley, but all of that gets replaced by generic demon roar. This is of course Adam's big plan, to have a bunch of soldiers and demons killed, then stitch them all together into an army, and then conquer the world, maybe. Or just kill a bunch more people. The plan beyond that moment is pretty unclear. The Scoobies all meet up and have a classic research session, where Xander proposes something sarcastically that turns out to be correct, and we get the enjoining spell, something that allows them to combine their skills and knowledge together into a singular being. This is the one concept from the episode that works from idea to execution. Thematically, it pushes forward the idea that Buffy's real strength comes from her relationships, and despite growing further apart from the people in her life, the core strength still remains, allowing her to accomplish things that would be impossible otherwise. It also presents the idea of the Slayer as more than a single individual, something that's explored more in future seasons. She represents a whole lineage of women who have all given up their lives to fight evil and keep the world safe. Eventually those past Slayers will come to haunt her, but also to guide her, offering her the opportunity to make the right choices where they failed. Before any of that, however, the Scoobies have to infiltrate the initiative. Again. This is probably the third or fourth time they've either done it or talked about doing it. This time, they do it Mission Impossible style, rappelling down the elevator shaft. While doing this, Willow and Buffy have an intense and loud heart-to-heart, dealing with some of the emotional issues they've been experiencing throughout the season. While the dialogue itself is not bad, having it take place here makes it feel like the writers ran out of room in the season for this reconciliation to happen, so just shoved into a space that it doesn't quite fit. Once they all reach the bottom of the elevator shaft, they're immediately caught, which is unsurprising on a macro level, as that's probably how it should have happened the last few times. They have a conversation with the generic general character, where he displays the expected level of overconfidence and bravado. Adam takes the opportunity to release all the holding cells, unleashing a horde of demons and starting off the destruction of the initiative. These scenes generally work pretty well, showing off the scale of the conflict, with the number of casualties on both sides shown. It again reinforces how incompetent the initiative is, but that's been the running theme throughout the season. Continuing that, they leave 2 guards to make sure Buffy doesn't escape, which lasts about 3 seconds after they leave the room. The gang managed to discover the super secret lab after looking at the plans for 30 seconds, and head off to confront Adam and do their enjoining spell. Buffy has to go first in order to give him time, and confronts Forrest and the zombies. Adam, instead of finishing her off, decides to wander away and assume his one incompetent underling will get the job done, thus ticking off a few more items on the evil overlord list. Do people even know that reference anymore? It might be too 2000s internet for today. Buffy's conflict with Forrest is another one that's been building up the entirety of the season, but instead of coming to a head in a satisfying emotional conflict, it's simply a standard fight. If instead of becoming a zombie, Forrest had been convinced by Adam that Buffy was a threat to Riley and the initiative, and he was a willing ally rather than a mindless automaton, that could have been something, but alas. Despite Buffy having trouble fighting him off, she eventually decides to let a severely injured Riley take her place, and he holds his ground surprisingly well. Buffy then confronts Adam, who instead of fighting his adversaries was just watching TV. It's yet another scene that showcases how inept of a big bad Adam is. While there's certainly ideas that can work, Frankenstein is a classic for a reason. They never formed a cohesive whole. In most scenes, Adam is just standing around waiting for things to happen. The few occasions when he makes use of his charisma and intelligence are good, but they're too rare to make an impact. His plan of an army of cyberdemons is also not different enough from the others to stand out, as it's ultimately about power, whatever form that takes. Even in his final scene in the last episode, he reveals another trait, that he's been making upgrades to himself and unveils a machine gun. A final combat trick is understandable, but his upgrades have never been mentioned before and seem unnecessary from his point of view. When Buffy previously fought him, she couldn't do anything. She was entirely outmatched physically, so there is no narrative need for him to change. That's enough harping on Adam as a concept, as we finally get to see the results on the enjoining spell, and it's pretty neat. Her utter dismantling of Adam feels satisfying, and the effects are fairly decent. It also shows how powerful magic is in the Buffyverse, as she effectively turns into Neo from the end of the Matrix, which was released about a year before this episode. This also features Adam at his most emotive, which is communicated effectively despite the heavy makeup. His desperation and fear shine through. The final scene of the episode features some white men in suits discussing the failure of the initiative and how they'll cover everything up and pretend like it never happened. As revealed in Season 8, that wasn't forever, but that's a long way away now. And that's the finale of the season, effectively. The end of the main plot. And then there's just one more episode. And it's a bit of a doozy in terms of analysis. For now, I hope you've enjoyed this review, and as always, be well.